Hi and welcome back. In this video we're looking at raising errors in Python. In the last lecture I showed you the syntax real quickly, but we're just going to go over it again in this video and give you a couple examples so that you know in which scenarios you should be raising errors. And also I'm going to introduce a new piece of Python syntax that I think is pretty cool. So let's right click our project that I've just created in PyCharm and create a new Python file. And again I'm going to call it app.py. This is a pretty popular name for your first or your most important file in Python that you're going to run. So you can right click it and run it. Normally this file will be called app.py or run.py. It's just a name for your main most important file. Let's say we have a code that is for a garage and it stores cars and you can add cars to it. So let's define a class garage that has an init method and it defines self.cars to be equal to an empty list. By the way, notice how in an attempt to reduce any indentation or tab errors, I have told PyCharm to show me any hidden characters or invisible characters. You've got these small, tiny dots that you can barely see without being in a video. You can certainly not see them very well on video, but you've also got these lines here. So you've got these dots that are very small. I'm going to zoom in the video just so you can see it. And you've got this line here. The line tells you where an indentation level begins, or where it is maintained. The dots show you the spaces. So you know these are not tabs, they're spaces. Okay, so if we were to add another line here, notice how now we've got a three line long gray line here that tells us that the indentation is maintained for all of this. Okay, so this garage has an init method. It has a len method, and that returns len of self.cars. And also it's got an add car method that takes in a car that we're going to add as an argument. However, we've not yet had the chance of working on this too much, so what we're going to do is we're going to print this method is a work in progress. This is obviously not the right way to go about it, as you know now. But then let's say that we are using this garage, so we're going to say Ford garage is garage, and then Ford.addCar, Fiesta, and then we want to print the len of Ford. Now, this method here is going to print out something out of the screen. But if we were not really paying attention, if we were, for example, saving this thing here to a file or to a database, we may not realize that this is printing something out. We would just see that this is 0 every time. Let's run our app. And as you can see here, it says this method is a work in progress, first of all, and then it just says 0. No matter how many cars we add, all we're going to see is this method is a work in progress over and over again. And if we were saving this length to a database or to a file or somewhere, it would always be 0. If you run it, then you may wonder, hey, what's going on here? And then you're going to have to actually run the program manually, like so in PyCharm, to see the printouts. And then you'd see, okay, this method, this code isn't working yet. So instead, of course, we can raise an error. We can raise, and all you do is raise, and then type a not implemented error. And then you got brackets, so you're creating a new not implemented error instance. This is a class. You're creating a new object of type not implemented error, and you're raising that. Inside the brackets, you can put a small message. We're going to say we can't add cars to the garage yet. Now when you run the app, which I'm going to do by pressing on the top right here, you get your nice trace back. Then it says, not implemented error. We can't add cars to the garage yet. Then it tells you where that error happened. Raise not implemented error. Here, we did it manually. It says line 9 in add car. So that's line 9 of our code inside the add car function. Now, where was this function called? Where did this function originally happen? On line 13 here, and for.addCar Fiesta. So as you can see, the error happened here. Inside this function was called here. So it tells you all the functions and parts of your file where this error has gone through. from being raised up until it reached the file level. So that's two places right now. So this is much better, because now when we run the program, it's going to crash. We're not going to save anything to the database, and we're going to see, oh, okay, it crashed, let's investigate. We would see that a not implemented error was raised, and that's all good. So this is how you raise an error. You use the keyword, then you create a new object. You can put something inside the brackets, which will be the message. Let's say we add another class. That is going to be a class of type car. And that's going to take a make and a model as parameters. And then it's also going to have a wrapper function, of course, because you always want these things. And it's going to return a car with self.make and self.model, like so. So this is just a representation of a car. Remember the wrapper dunder function. You can print out the car object, and it's going to print something that looks like this. Okay. Now, the add car function here should only accept the parameter being a car object. So how do you do that? Well, pretty straightforward actually. There is a built-in function in Python called isInstance. isInstance tells you whether the variable that you give it is an instance of the type that you give it. So this is the variable, car. This is the type, which is the class, car with a capital C. So if not isInstance, so if car is not an instance of car, we're going to raise a type error. And we're going to say, try to add a car class name to the garage, but you can only add car objects. So there's a bit of a longer message there. And all I've done is formatted a string and said car.class.name. That's the name of the class of the variable. So if this was a string, this would print out str. If this was a class, if this was a car, it would print out car. And this is just a nice bit of a construct that you can access for essentially any variable. This gives you the class of the variable, and this gives you the name of the class. So we try to add that to the garage, but you can only add car objects. And then, of course, we're not going to raise a not implemented error. And now here we can say self.cars.append car. And you may wonder, well, why do you not put this in an else? You don't have to. If the car is not an instance of the car class, we're going to raise the error, and that's going to crash our program. We are never going to reach this line if that happens. If, however, it is an instance, it's not going to go in here, and it's just going to go here. So you don't need the else for anything, because the only path, there are only two paths. One where this doesn't run, because you raised the error, and the other one where this runs, and that's where you want it to run. So that's sufficient. So once again, let's try to add this string car. And notice how now we get a nice traceback here that says, try to add an str to the garage, but you can only add car objects. I think that's a pretty nice error message. So what can you do? Well, you can create a new car object. Let's say car, this is going to be a Ford Fiesta, and then you're going to add that car, which is a car object, into the add car function. Again, the value of the car variable is a car object, and that's what you are teleporting over to this car variable. Okay, so the value of the car variable is now being assigned to this car variable here, and then you're going to use that inside here. So now we can run it, and it all works. We can print the len of Ford, and you'll see that 1 gets printed out, which is pretty nice. This is raising errors in Python. It's really straightforward. All you have to do is, when you want an error to happen, raise it, create an object of it, remember the brackets, and inside the brackets, if you want, it's totally optional, you can put a nice message for when the error gets raised, the person who's writing the code knows what happened. errors are most useful for developers. Of course, if your users, if somebody was downloading this code over the internet and saying, oh, I'm going to run my garage, of course, there's a bit basic for that. But if somebody was downloading your code and using it, they encountering a type error may not be terribly useful for them because it doesn't tell them anything. They're not developers. So errors are most useful for developers. When you are writing code or when somebody else is helping you write code or working on a team, having nice errors can be really helpful because then when you make a mistake or you do something incorrectly, you'll quickly get an error and you'll be able to fix it. If you don't get errors and instead you print things out like we did earlier on, you may never find out that this is not working until you see that the program doesn't do what you were expecting. So raise errors, use them, and they'll be your best friend in no time. So that's it for this video, raising errors in Python, and I'll see you on the next one.